Hi everyone, we are at ACAMS Hollywood today. With me, I have Dheeraj here, who is Vice President at Everest Group and industry practitioner for financial crime and compliance space. Dheeraj, thank you so much for giving us time today. Would love to just pick your brains on a few trends we are seeing in the industry and just see what's your take on them. So from where you sit at Everest Group, what's the biggest shift you are seeing in how financial institutions think about fraud and financial crime today?
So if you look at financial crime and compliance, there are multiple areas within it, multiple line of businesses, whether it is onboarding or KYC, it would be anti-money laundering.
Right.
And then fraud management is also a big area within the financial crime and compliance value chain. We are seeing banks now thinking a bit more about fraud as an integral area for them. Primarily because if you look at some of the large banks, they do have different teams working on AML as well as fraud. But they now understand that fraud is something which is integral for the end customer's overall experience, because they do not want to be in a position where they lose out on a customer just because they were not there at the time of distress.
Right.
Or they were not able to essentially provide the complete resolution related to that particular fraud.
And do you see solving for fraud becoming a growth lever as well for businesses? Obviously, there can be other priorities for the banks or for the financial institutions, but do you see companies who can solve fraud on a compliance scale globally, that they can use it as a growth lever?
Yeah, of course. See, if you look at some of the higher priority dimensions based on the research which we did recently as well as the multiple industry conversations, fraud would come just after overall risk management for most of the large banks, right? So if your reputational risk, your financial risk, your penalties, etc. is taken care of, in that case, customer experience becomes a very important factor, right? Because that actually helps you retain that customer, and then it also makes sure that the customer essentially trusts in you and you are able to then grow with that customer with multiple newer offerings.
And what's most important in customer experience?
Yeah, within customer experience, I believe ease of access. They do not want to keep talking to AI chatbot and not able to reach to a resolution. So they do not want to get into that dooms loop, and they want to make sure that they actually talk to a human. And at least at the time of distress, they basically are able to get to some sort of a solace that the issue is being looked at. So that builds a lot of trust. That is something which, especially on the fraud side, would help the end customer and also the organizations.
And what is restricting banks or broader financial institution to adopt it, right? When you say, it sounds a no-brainer that everyone should solve for fraud prevention, everyone should solve for a better customer experience. But what are the things that is preventing the bigger banks or the middle segment banks to adopt it at a institution level?
So see, adoption can't be driven by just one party. Adoption depends on who is implementing it, say the banks, and it also depends on the end customer, at what stage are they in their digital maturation journey, right? A lot of these clients for these large banks are not at a particular maturity when it comes to digital adoption.
Okay.
But when you look at some of the mid-sized banks, some of the Fintechs, etc., who are digital native, their customer base is also comparatively younger and much more mature when it comes to digital adoption, right? So for them, it is much easier to implement some of these, but for the larger banks, the investment is much higher because the adoption would take a lot of handholding.
But isn't the risk higher for them as well? As you mentioned that the new age banks, the digital banks, they have been created with the idea of a better customer experience and are giving a tough competition, I assume, to the legacy banks and institutions as well. So isn't the risk higher for them to not do it as well? Yes, the investment could be substantial, but if they don't do it, isn't it an existential threat for them?
So I'll try to declutter it or crystallize it with saying that you do not go away from your roots. You make sure that your DNA is intact as an organization, right? But then you also don't want to stay much behind when it comes to keeping in pace with the times, right?
Okay.
So it's that balance which is very important, right? In terms of you taking care of your existing customers, in terms of you providing them that consistent experience vis-a-vis you getting onto a bandwagon of, say, AI, transformations, etc. So there has to be a clear balance. And of course, whether it is large bank or whether it is mid-size, regional, super regional, they are also trying to understand this space much better, try to understand what the maturity possibly would be, and hence they are in this journey of transformation.
So addressing a elephant in the room, AI, so we attended a lot of sessions. In a lot of booths as well, we saw people talking about AI, the use of AI in financial institutions, in fighting against fraud. What's the trend you are seeing of AI adoption within financial institutions?
So see, as a off-the-bat calculation, if I do, currently, especially in the regulated industries, you would see somewhere around a 10% adoption of AI within their complex processes. Of course, some of the front office processes, you would see more than 50% adoption of AI as well. But as of now, this is the current state of adoption when it comes to back office, complex processes, etc.
And do you see AI being used by fraudsters in innovative frauds as well?
Yeah, of course. And that's why it's very important for the banks to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to usage of AI for different fraud cases. So proactively coming up with potential scenarios of fraud and preempting that, and essentially working towards looking for solutions or creating solutions for those is imperative for the banks.
And what are some fraud vectors that you feel banks and fintechs are underestimating and or are underprepared for?
There are many, right? We are seeing, when we look at the data, the volumes of frauds which are on the rise are check fraud, APP fraud. We are also seeing a lot of synthetic identity fraud, and then account takeovers. So these four, for sure, you would hear from almost all the banks when it comes to different vectors within the fraud space.
And just last thing, at Everest, what would you want, let's say, CIOs or SVPs at banks to look forward to from something you are publishing at Everest, upcoming reports, upcoming trend, upcoming like webinars, if there's something happening which you guys would want the banking CIOs or risk professional compliance manager to look forward to?
Yeah, so we are investing our time and effort into multiple areas. We are trying to cover the entire breadth, as well as some of the niche areas within the depth of financial crime and compliance. So we do have peak metric assessment, which is proprietary IP for Everest Group, coming up, one around fraud management products. The other one is anti-money laundering product peak metrics, so 2 peak metrics there. We are also covering the managed service provider space with our flagship financial crime and compliance operations services peak metrics, wherein we are also covering, have a section around fraud operations. Along with that, we are also trying to understand more nuances in terms of what are the buying behaviors for the enterprises when it comes to specific areas which definitely can be done utilizing AI around model risk management, controls as a services, credit risk, etc., which basically broadens the ambit of financial crime and compliance to risk and compliance. And then there are few niche areas within financial crime and compliance, such as trade-based money laundering, trade finance, synthetic identity, or the entire fraud and identity space within payments, transaction monitoring. So yeah, there are a lot of areas which we would love to cover this year.
Yeah, I'm sure, and we definitely look forward to all the reports, all the peak matrices, and whatever information we can gather, because it's a very evolving industry. It's a very evolving time as well, when we are seeing every week, every month something new is coming up in terms of how banks or fintechs are fighting financial crime or frauds. And it's all about catching up or trying to catch up to the new things coming up, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dheeraj, again for giving us time, and hope you have a good trip.
Yeah, thanks, Shivam.